accept our invitation and having you here discussing a very important work for us. I have to say, one of the ways in which we, one can look at the work of Jamel Akbar in many different dimensions. But one thing that for us was very interesting, it was especially the work around conceptualizing, defining the built environment in different situations, especially around society or Muslim society and around the Muslim city. So this was, I think, for us very important, especially in relation to refugee camps too. I mean, I hope that maybe we'll have a little bit of time after the presentation for the next days also to have space for discussion, because we felt that was very helpful for us to understand, for example, on refugee camps, some of the categories that you work on are actually helping very much to understand how that specific space that was conceived to be just in transition and temporary, become more and more solidified. And in a way, the way how people start to structure the space is something that we are still struggling with. And one of the struggle is that is constantly applied some kind of Western perspective of explaining how, in this case, refugee camps are structured. And I think one interesting things would be actually using some of the categories that you work on and the concept that you work on to understand, in this case, also what people build by themselves in refugee camps. So, and I think that more in general, I would say that the ways in which also we can, instead of calling the non-planned city informal, but to start to use some important weight or categories that try us to explain how the built environment was created by the people themselves. I think that is definitely a great contribution. So that today we have, we start with today, and hopefully during the next day we try every morning to build up several arguments so that will lead to the third day to have a sort of final conclusion of the seminar. So once again, thank you for accepting this invitation. I'm very glad that you made it all the way from Istanbul to here. Looking forward to here.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for giving me the chance to meet such bright students. I'm sure they are bright, from different cultures. And the reason I'm recording this today, because I'm hoping, and I'm sure I will learn from you. I will learn much from your questions. The reason is that for recording this is to put you in the context. I'll give 3 talks. The third one, after tomorrow, is mostly practical. It's about the profession, the role of the architect, and about the everyday environment design. How do we go about it? It's a perspective. There we can argue and reach to a conclusion. Tomorrow, which is the public lecture, I was really hesitant. Should I give tomorrow's lecture today or today's lecture tomorrow? So I leave that to you to decide. Tomorrow, you will say, okay, this is about the Middle Eastern cities. We will accept that. It is a mode of creating the environment. It could be acceptable in this culture or no. So there is little debate. But today, you will disagree with me. Thank God there is no eggs and tomatoes here, so you would throw it on me. Why do I say this? Because after 1986 I wrote the English book, Crisis in the Built Environment. Then 2 years later, I wrote the Arabic book, which is an expansion of the English book. And then I did not publish anything. I was working for more than 20 years in this book about, the title is Scissoring Rights. And I started to talk about it just recently. In English, maybe this is the first time I talk about in English. So I don't know what's the reaction of the people toward it. So I spent so much time. The book is 1,800 pages. It's so long simply to close the counter arguments. So you will have a lot of counter arguments against what I will propose to you today. But what I noticed in the Arab world, the first time I present this, total rejection. But then gradually, from the questions and answers, they don't fight back, but they say, maybe he's crazy. So let's leave him alone. So I took this chance, because it's in the development stage, to record this, to learn from your questions. Now, what I do usually, I look at the traditional environment, I analyze it, try to understand it, and then make conclusions. That is basically what I do. Something that centers around my work is that I claim it's value-free. Regardless of the culture of the people, regardless of their religion, there is basic structure that if we followed, we could have better civilizations. Let me give an example. Maybe there is a dead-end street that the legal system says it is owned by the people. Now, if the people there of that street, whether they are of any cultural background, let's say they are Muslims, they may pray in it. Non-Muslims, they may dance in it. But ultimately, who will clean the street? The people, because they own it, regardless of their cultural background. The task of cleaning the street, of maintaining the street, of checking the pipes in the street is the responsibility of the people. And this would lead to a different structure than a structure where the state is responsible of everything, than a structure where private companies will take care of maintaining the street. So a central work in my central argument in my work is that I call it in Arabic harakiyat, or it is mechanisms. Regardless of the culture and the religion of the people, regardless of their location, there is basic human tendencies that I'll explain now. Now, I will argue, stemming from that argument, that our current political economic structure in the world will lead to unsustainable environment. No matter what they do, conferences, meetings, rules, regulations, no way. We're heading toward unsustainable environment, and that's what I'll explain today. Trying just to remember the points. Unfortunately, in our profession, especially in the Middle East, maybe some other countries, when architects, planners want to learn from the past, they look at the end product. They look at the old city, they look at the arches, they look at whether it's dome or window. They look at these elements, and then they select from them the pattern that they think is good for our days now. So let's say the dome will pass, the Mashrabiyya will pass. This is a Hafsiyya project that won an Aga Khan award in Tunis, with dead-end street, with overpasses. So they look at the form. They copy from the form what they like, and they bring it to the future, like Rasim Batran, like. And most Western countries, when they do projects, that's what they do. But they never question the socio-political structure, the economic structure. They accept capitalism as it is, or socialism, or whatever. But this is the product of property rights, human rights that in the past was different than ours today. Building materials in the past and technology in the past that is different from ours today. So if they managed in the past, if we like these products and they managed to do it in the past with simple technology, with simple materials, we should, if we manage to look at this wisdom, we should do much better than this. Because the machine that generated this might generate something like that. But if we take these elements and pass them, by neglecting the process, concentrating on the product, we are copying from the past. But we are different from the people of the past. Now our requirements are different. We are totally different. Traditional wisdom did not have the chance to perform under modern knowledge and technology. New paradigms were invented that gave the state more power through laws and regulations. Our current societies are characterized by polluting the environment. Failure of capitalism and socialism led thinkers to search for answers. Now, because there is this sustainable problem and so on, and the classes between rich and people, there is several attempts by many thinkers in the Western culture to find solutions. What went wrong? Now, their argument is that humanity is searching for a system that is fair, open, and transparent, a system that's based on meritocracy. But all these systems we have one thing in common: producing poverty, pollution, climate change, And the argument that capitalism is self-correcting system seems to fail. Let's take the example of the current world situation. To live like Australians, we need 5.4 global Earth to sustain life in the Australian level. It speaks for itself. Spain 2.1 and so on. So we are heading to pollution. No way out with the current system. Each year it gets worse. This is with the country size. South Korea, to live in this level, it needs 7 or 8 the size of its area. Now, I will review 4 thinkers, what they're saying about the current situation. The first is David Harvey. You know David Harvey, right? He's well known. Some of his argument is that relations to nature versus compound growth and alienation. He always argues that there is contradiction between these both. He argues that capitalism appears to be liberating force, but it is dominating. He argues that artisanal means individual having craft skills and so on. He argues that with capitalism, the individual artist was stripped out of his choices, his skills, because everything is mechanized. Okay. I looked at many videos of his. With all this criticism, he still believed that the government, another sort of government, should organize the way we live. Capitalism failed, Marxism doesn't work, so what do we do? And in one interview, the interviewer put him in a corner. He said, well, in India, before colonization, villages were independent without state intervening in controlling their economic activities. He said, maybe some villages become richer, maybe there is a famine. Who will take care of that? We should have a central government or a sort of government, but not capitalist government. And he gave ideas that the minute you think of it, you ask yourself a question. Okay, these things that are what's supposed to happen, but who will do it? Who will do it? The answer is a government, a sort of government. What I argue for is that we don't need governments like the governments we have now. We need different sort of power relations between people. And that's what I will explain in these 3 lectures. Some of his argument, I just summarized some of his points. Since you know his work, I don't have to repeat it. Now, another guy is Paul Mason. He's British. He's Marxist. And he said, we were concentrating in the past on the work as a central issue in Marxism. We should change that to another. He's arguing that, this is, I'm quoting him, information technology is different. It cheapens real things so rapidly that disturbs capitalism, normal mechanism of adaptation and survival. Our utopia for 200 years, as for Marx, was based on work, but we are to change that. We have to come up with utopias that are no longer based on work, because work isn't going to be necessary for our great-grandchildren. Is the management of scarcity in the favor of poor people, in favor of social justice? So he argues, but if you listen to him, you don't get a real answer. What do we do? Where do we go? And this is dead in the street, I think, in the Western culture. They want an answer, they want solutions. Capitalism is always there. Capitalism is faster than thinkers. It provides solutions, but making things worse. Now there is, among the new movements is the common good movement. I'm sure you know it. Common good movement is that now the companies, those who are creating our new world are maybe greedy, but we as people, we can reduce the speed of that because our constitutions calls for equality and so on. So we should use our powers to reduce this greedy attitude of companies, enterprises, and so on and so forth. So he proposed, and this movement is going very fast. It's spreading fast. A chart for any company, party, whatever. I'll leave this for you, the presentation. Sorry. That we can evaluate companies, how good they are doing for the society, for the common good. And then we can support or dissupport these companies by buying goods from them, by working with them, against them, and so on. Now, the last person I'm proposing as thinkers of trying to look, you know, I'm sure Jeremy Rifkin. He's a very interesting guy. He's the most interesting among the thinkers now. And his argument is that in our civilizations, that humans shift from one paradigm to another. And that because there is always new communication technology to manage economic activities. He always talks about communication, sources of energy, mobility. there was the first industrial revolution, that communication technology changed. First it was letters, then it became telegrams, then telephone, now it is internet. The same for moving things. It was by horses and so on. Then it became by train, now it's by ships, airplane, and so on. So if one look at the society from this perspective, one realizes that we are heading now toward the new revolution of the internet, and we call it the Internet of Things, where the people can now sell electricity to the government. The people are more powerful, and the big mediating companies are disappearing and so on. He has fantastic argument, and his argument, I think, is much accepted in Germany, China, and they are, as I understood, implementing it on the national level. Now, what I argue is that I call it the three essences of life: resources, permissions, and knowledge. Resources, this is my argument. Resources, what is the resources? If you want to start any business or any farm, any factory, anything that's productive, you need three things. Resources, which is a land, a building, money, and so on. You need permissions, permission from the government, from the ministry, and you need knowledge. If these three are not for those who manage to get it, we are heading to unsustainable globe. This is my basic argument. I will explain it now. Here is a traditional city where the system, this after a few years becomes like this. The system is based on reviving land. You know Malthus theory, right? Malthus argued in the 18th century or 19th century, and his argument is the basics of Western economy. He argued that the resources are numerical in their increase. The 2 becomes 4, 6, 8, and so on. The consumption of the people is, and their increase in number is geometrical. The 2 becomes 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. So a day will come where the resources of the earth will not be suffice to us. A day will come where the resources will finish and the people will fight each other. That's why we have to control access to resources. Otherwise, everybody will take as much as he like, and some people will not find what to eat or what to wear. This basic concept affected the Western philosophy of economy. And that's why we have rules, regulations to control through permissions who gets what, who has the right to get to what resources. Now, in the Middle East, because I go back to Malthus' theory, there was a debate in the United States between 2 groups, Malthusians and anti-Malthusians. Who won the debate? It seems the anti-Malthusians. The more people there is, the more knowledge increases, the more options we have in life. So we will come out of the oil age, and oil did not finish because we find new resources of energy. And they made a debate between 2 of them, and they said, one group said to the other, select the anti-Malthusians, told the Malthusians, select 8 or 10, I don't remember, minerals, and we see after 10 years whether their price went up or down. They made the bet. Who won? The group who said the price will go down. The price went down for these 8 or 10 minerals. So the earth has more than what human need, if managed. The problem with the world is managed. Who will manage it? The idea is always a state will manage that. My argument is that the minute there is a state to manage those resources, the state is composed of people, the people has wishes, and gradually some people will take more than others. Now, this is in the traditional environment, a street with a building, and then gradually the roads follow up the topography and you have almost the perfect solution. That's very difficult to obtain through planning, because every decision is made through the residents of the site, through trial and error. They own the site, they feel the site, they know what is the site, and they make the decision on the site. Now somebody, I'm sure you will ask me later, would that mean it will be chaotic environment? My answer is no, and I'll explain that, but it is outside question. Maybe you answer it tomorrow. Let's take, for example, the production of housing. Here you see a centrally produced housing. If you just see how much waste this generated when they built this, and how much this is poor people who made housing, how much they absorbed waste from the environment to make this. Now, of course, we as professionals, we don't like this. It looks terrible. But let's not forget that these are very, very, very poor people. And if we give access to resources to the people, as I said in the beginning, resources, knowledge, and permissions, we will not find people like this. This will never happen. And this is another mode of production, which is in Morocco by developers. So this is the most wasteful by the government, least wasteful because the developer wants to make profit, so he's very careful about utilizing maximum resources. I love this slide because it's really two extreme mentalities. This is the parliament in Dhaka. They don't have in Bangladesh gravel for concrete. They imported gravel from other countries. While there is old ladies in their 70s, 80s, breaking the bricks to be used as in the mix of concrete. How can these two meet in the same country? I'm sure the situation in Sweden is different because we're so advanced in knowledge and so on. But that's why I said in the beginning, we will disagree, but gradually we might come up to middle situation. I would like to hear your criticism about this. Now, when the people want to live, they don't have resources. They try to utilize everything. This is, for example, seats that was used as flower books. This is Afghanistan. This is a rocket tail. This is pieces of tiles that made as a seat. This is sink, flipped down, upside down, and was used. This is a place in India where they sell remains of building to be reused. This is in Taif, where they use old blankets for privacy. This is in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where every single space is utilized, a refrigerator that reused as storage. This is again in Bangladesh. This is in Tunis, much better example that reusing a space, an old building that was reused. But you see, these things we don't like now as an architect. If the people had the right to access to resources, gradually as it happened in the past, we will have a fabric that is almost, given their technical ability, is almost perfect, like this. These only come when the people has access to resources, and they experience knowledge, they share knowledge. Gradually, a piece of knowledge, because of hundreds of people, thousands of people contribute in developing it, it becomes mature and mature and mature. Now, when planners, architects, economics, when they look at the issue of giving the people the chance to have access to resources, immediately they will say, oh, the built environment will be chaotic, it will be bad. But those people are poor. These are fascinating technical solutions. Now let me give a practical example. If you bring fire with gas, what happens? Explosion. If you bring rainwater with mud, what happens? It's wiped out. This is in southern Morocco. The villages there on the valley are made of mud. But how they manage the people to solve rainwater discharge is interesting. And it's not only in that village, in all the Mediterranean countries and maybe all the ancient world, not only in the Muslim regions. I'm sure you'll find it in Italy, in Brazil, you see here the water collects here, goes like this. This area is treated differently than this area. Now, in our modern days, what happens? This is in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. The buildings throw water into the street. They collect it in the street. Then they go into major street, and then how much does this cost the society? It costs a fortune. The water goes like that, collected like that, like that. This is in Istanbul. The same thing. Cambridge, Massachusetts. But look at this in North Africa. Compact environment. The rainwater goes from one roof to the second roof, next roof, gradually to the valleys, to the discharge channels that are nature, that are graved in nature, and that those areas are respected, cannot be revived by anyone. This is in Tangier, Tunis. You see, discharge of rainwater from rooftops. The responsibility of cleaning each rooftop is on the user or the owner of that building. This is in Tunis. The water collects from here, there, collects from here, there. Like this, like this. This is the market again in Tunis. You see, this is the opening there. This is in Algeria. Water comes like this, goes like that. Esrir, Morocco. This led, when the people are given the right to, because if somebody revives a piece of land and I collect the water in my roof, throw it in the street, somebody else to revive the land next to me, it is his responsibility to take the rights of my collected water with him. The next he has to take care of the two, and so on. So this is this established something that I call right of precedence. Who came earlier will have the right. Of course, we don't like it as professionals. Why? Because I don't want to bother with these things. I want to live freely in my house. Why do I have to take care of the discharge water of others? But let's remember, he took the land for free almost. Second, if companies are established to take care of this thing, we throw the water into the street, who is paying for this company? Ultimately, it is the money of who? Of the society. This money can be utilized somewhere else, in education, in health, in entertainment. In a case, I found a lot of cases in books of law. Somebody had a house, and then he has a water spout, and this guy built a new house, has staircase to his house. They both died. 100 years later, this guy objected. He said, his rainwater drops into my staircase. I want him to remove this water spout. The judge said, no, it is already there. That means he was there first. So there is a whole body of literature in the law that says there is something called possessing damage. I have the right to possess damage over others, not killing damage, no. The damage, they consider, for example, opening a window is a damage. In Yemen, in Hadramaut, they have 7, 8-story buildings. If they want to rebuild one building, and that building is demolished, before they demolish the building, people go and observe exactly where is the location of the openings. So when he built the new building, what happens is that he cannot have 1 centimeter of opening more than the opening he had. So they know the rights of each property. So each property has rights that could be different than the next. Yet it's amazing that when you look at the traditional environment, you see all the buildings resemble each other. Although the people had freedom, but the building resemble each other. Why? Because there is conventions. Conventions because of the freedom of the people. If somebody asks, I'll explain that later. Again, this is in Asrir. These are very, very poor people. These are very, very poor villages. This is inside a room of a neighbor. So the water goes from this, from this to canal or river or whatever, or valley, and then it is collected here somewhere. So it doesn't cost the society much. Now imagine that in that city we have a discharge system. How much materials it will consume from the earth? Think about that. Let's not think much about how terrible life is. I know life won't be easy, but it will become easier. I will explain that later. Even solid waste. Most cities are now centered around getting rid of solid waste through pipes, then collected in the treatment plants. And how much does that cost? We have digesters, I'm sure you know about that can treat waste. Now, the 3 essentials are resources. Resources are owned by those who manage to possess them without any permission. This is important, without any permission. For example, if all the Moroccans or Palestinians, they want to go to Qatar, take the oil, the gas, that's theirs, because they possessed it. Because they possessed it. But now anybody will say, yeah, but it will be chaotic. Why? Because a company will come and take all the gas. I say, remember, you are thinking as capitalist. When we think that way, because we're thinking that there is one rich man who has 1,000 people who will help him to revive piece of land to become a farm. Let's say he wants to establish a farm for milk, cows, and so on and so forth. Okay? The answer is no. That person will not exist initially. Because why I allow you to hire me, I will work next to you. Or I'll be your partner. This is important. When you give the people the right to take the resources, they will know they won't be unemployed people. The more unemployed people there is, the cheaper the wages there is, the more people you can slave. The richer is those group who can slave others, the more consumptions they will make, the more pollution. But if we give access to all the people to resources, either they work jointly as partners. I'll explain this, but let's go back to the next point. Permission. We should have the right to make businesses, factories without permission, but without damaging the people or the environment. Now, you easily, in China, for example, India, investors may establish a factory there, take all kinds of permission, but then what they will do? They pollute the environment because they are powerful. But if we give access to resources to the people and we want to establish a factory, we cannot hire people to work under us because they are people like us. So they will work with us. We become partners. Now, if we are partners working in a factory, would we build a factory that damages us? We will not do that. Of course, we will not do that. We will try to make a factory that's clean. It's only logical. And if we were, let's say, greedy and made a factory that will pollute the environment or the others, the people affected will not be quiet. They will stop us because they have the power to do that. Because people are quite equal in their powers. Knowledge, we will have a lot of debate of this, but knowledge could be secret for those who invented it. And they should enjoy it. But for others, if they manage to open the secret, to utilize it. Now, the immediate question will come to mind is, the people will not work hard to make new inventions. We'll argue about that later. We'll keep this. Now, we'll have, if we give access to the people to resources and permissions and knowledge, we would expect the environment will be composed of people. These are people. Each circle is a person. That one can be richer than the other 10 times because he's smarter 10 times than the other. One can be powerful more than the other twice or 3 times in gaining, possessing materials. So he can be richer 2, 3 times, 10 times. But not like our situation now, where you have people who has no money, they're indebted, or very rich people who can utilize other people. These are production companies, for example, the circle. So these guys can utilize those people. Here, no, they have to work together to make a production system. They have to become partners together. Now, this is important. If we look at our consuming things that we use, like shirts, microphone, we can classify them into 3 types. Necessities, like bread, house, jacket. Needed, milk, pen, refrigerator. Complementary. Now, the iPhone was complementary, now it is necessity. Every item moves from one stage to another. Car was necessity maybe in the United States. It is now necessity in the United States, but maybe 10 years later, because of the oil, it becomes needed or complementary. In Saudi Arabia, car was a necessity. Now people are looking because the government raised it is needed. They are thinking differently. Now, if the people are quite close in their income and they are quite powerful, what happens? When the market responds in producing goods, they most likely, to make profit, they will produce goods that makes more profit. So they will react to the masses of people, so they will produce things that are needed. So it's stupid for a businessman to make a yacht or chandelier that costs $500,000 because nobody will buy it. It's only logical. The problem in these ideas, I don't have case studies. Once I wrote a paper to a journal, they said, they refused the paper. These ideas like Jamel Akbar's, and you don't have statistics to support your argument. I said, okay, I don't have statistics because it doesn't exist. What I'm trying to do is to bring the wisdom, the good wisdom, not everything, of the past that we may learn from it. Because we are in a dead end now. Now, the health of the society can be measured by the production of these goods. You remember that slide from Bangladesh, where the old ladies breaking stones and bricks with the parliament? You'll find in an equally divided societies economically, you'll find expensive things that most people cannot afford. So the way production distributed in the society between these three classes of goods reflects the health of the society. This is just a small logo for the two extremes. There is no boundary for people to move. They become partners. He is richer than this once or twice, but here, boundaries, you cannot move between states without permissions, without visas, without. Rich individuals cornered poor people. No. Just a few points. I made them if you want to read them. Now, what's interesting about our current situation is much based on the monetary system. What does it do? Let me give an example. Banks create wealth. In the capitalist system, banks, states create wealth. The state can print money, the banks loan money, but the production is not necessarily of what the people do, what they produce. The banking system, for example, if you go to the bank and you deposit $10,000, the bank has the right to keep part of that money for those who want to take their deposit and lend the other money. So when the bank lends the money, the capital of the bank increased without producing goods. To the extent, and you may read about it, I'm sure most of you know about it, that they have this equation. If somebody deposits 30,000, it becomes 370,000. Let me make a simple example. If I came to you as a bank, I took $1 euro. I went and I bought a piece of bread. That guy who bought the bread deposited the money. You give the money to another guy, and so on. Without euro, 3 people consume 3 breads. However, now, not only that, but the wealth is increased. That's why if you read in economy, you will notice that our debt is increasing and increasing and increasing. For the system to continue, the economic system, it has to increase, while the production is almost the same. Now, if we don't have this monetary system that exists, and maybe the system is based on gold or silver, or you cannot print gold or silver. You cannot write checks. I gave you gold as a bank. Somebody else wants gold. You give it to him. You have nothing. The only mean of creating wealth is working, producing good from the earth, and consuming it. That's why in our system now we have credit cards, because the bank wants you to consume. The minute you sign a paper that you want money to buy a house or a car, the wealth is increased without really increasing what's existing on the earth. Sometimes they say, we lost 30 billion in the stock market. Well, the earth is the same cows, the same factories, the same clothes, everything is the same. It's virtual. It is only virtual. What happens? I'll come to that later. Now, what I argue is that there is no borders. The minute there is borders between countries, now these are individuals making companies as partners, and they are sharing their products, exchanging knowledge. But if people are controlled, what happens? We have major cities, mega cities like Cairo, Rabat. I don't know about Stockholm, like London. These cities consume more than they produce societies. Why? Because the administration of the nation is in that city. So these cities always sucking goods from factories that are making things, or companies making things, for poor people that are employed forcibly, because they are forced to do that. Slavery, sucking goods to the cities. This is not only moving goods from the people who do not, from the people who produce to the people who do not produce, and they live lavish life. No, it's not only that. But also, the people here, when they are here, in their communities, to save money, they will try to utilize what exists in their surrounding. So you won't see a building like that one in Bangladesh. You see a building in this area. If this area is mostly wood around, they will use wood. If this is stone, mostly they will use stone. And that makes it more sustainable. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to say that our capitalist system is trying to solve sustainability. It will fail because there is monopoly in these 3 essentials. Monopoly makes people who consume without knowing what's happening for the poor people. The people are working harder and harder, and they're manufacturing things and moving things around because that class of people enjoying life. Therefore, we will never be able to solve sustainability within our current system. To give a simple example, I spent maybe 2 years studying the professional structure in the US, just reading. It's amazing how bureaucracy works. In most professions, 40 to 50% in that profession, they don't produce goods. They produce organization. Look at Washington, D.C. Buildings and buildings and buildings of employees. What do? If you ask the chairman of the program, would you do better if you were free without the dean? He'll say maybe yes. You ask the dean, would you do better School of Architecture if you were without president and all this university? He would say yes. Ask the president, would you do better university without the government? He says yes. Everybody in his level will say, I'll do better. Just give me the right to do things. Give him more freedom. The Ministry of Agriculture in Saudi Arabia, huge building. They don't produce a single lemon. Just paperwork, pushed around. Huge defense, army and so on. They don't go to war. Why is this spending? The people don't want war. Do you want war? Who makes the war? Who makes war? The people sitting in their palaces, in their offices, they push people to war. How much are we spending on equipments and machines of war? The earth is much bigger than what do we need. Just let the people work freely, invent things, enjoy things. That's why when I said there is no borders, the more the area there is on the earth, let's say, when I came, I was asking my wife, why do people live in Sweden in this cold weather? The world is very big. Can they go somewhere else? Maybe somebody like cold weather, he will come here to mine things. Maybe somebody like hot weather, he goes to Sudan to irrigate. So the larger the area, the more free the people to move around, the most likely you will do a business or a job that you like. Then you become inventive. The more inventive you are, the more productive you are. But because the market does not have these lavish things, your consumption will be on your needed and necessary things. Because there is no credits, there is no advertising like those big companies do. So consumption will be in a level on a decent life that does not pollute the earth. So my last statement, and I hope you will argue strongly against me, that's what I'm saying. Temptation plus availability of low price services and commodities because of low wages as a result of monopolizing the three essentials of life, resource, would lead to maximum ill-management consumption. Thus, no sustainability. That's my basic argument. Within the current system, there is no sustainability. They are making conferences, Rio de Janeiro, Paris, meeting, going, coming. No way. Thank you.
Resonates with the reading that we did for the crisis of the built environment. There are a lot of things that in a way are linked to that specific book. Maybe I just start with the first question, but of course it's very much open, just that everyone can warm up. Because one thing I was struggling with, both by reading the text and by today listening to you,
yes,
there is one part which is, of course, very, very attractive. addressing one of the problems that we have in front of us. One thing I'm struggling with specifically is how we can make these distinctions that you also call in terms of freedom, in terms of absence of control, or let's say control that is done differently and not by the state. What is different from the kind of neoliberal proposition?
Yeah, that is.
I'm trying to also a little bit be more precise.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Very, very, very important question.
Somehow, if I hear
Friedman.
Let's say many theoreticians of the laissez-faire, and many contemporary believer in neoliberalism, in a way they are like you, questioning the presence of the state, like you arguing how unproductive is when the state is trying to control things, and partially also like you also saying that if people are free, simply things get organized by themselves. So there are a lot of this kind of superposing arguments that I'm struggling to separate in order to try to understand how your critique is not simply embedded into this kind of ideology of neoliberalism. So this is definitely, let's say, one part, but also to break it down more specifically also when you talk about the state. There also there is something that I would like better to, if you can articulate a little bit better, because in the way I understand the state, in a sense, is always as an instrument, not as a form of government necessarily. So the problem is the government, or let's say, if you use Foucault to say the governmentality, than the state itself, because otherwise also we are maybe pointing out the box, but we are not pointing out actually what comes out from the box, which is more problematic in some ways. It's also trying to understand if the problem is the state itself, or it is the form of governmentality, which can operate actually beyond the states, because in fact, if you look at neoliberalism, they would love to and in fact, all these companies, by the way, are transnational companies. They are until now, they are the only ones that are actually having a full transnational dimensions. Meanwhile, people are still stuck into a nation state. So there is today is a strange combinations in which somehow people are stuck in the nation state. Meanwhile, there are already people living, and companies especially living already in this kind of free world that can navigate and can have access to different resources. This is why, in fact, they are able to use all of them. So that also, I would like you, if you can a little bit clarify, let's say what is your take in that sense? And maybe the very last point, try also to bring the discussion here in Sweden, and looking at how, for example, the struggle here was actually very different in a way in which maybe, and I'm start learning about it, but partially I would imagine that some of the way in which people here manage to obtain certain rights, actually using the states, making the project of the welfare states ultimately was the fact how you can take over the states and make sure that there is a more egalitarian system, make sure that people don't have to take care about not having a house. They have to have access to certain kind of things that considered should be accessible to everyone. So that, I think there the project was more, if I simplify, more somehow of the state can provide something that you would say people actually get if they don't have the state. So maybe we can use also that kind of, in this case, simplifications to imagine how on one side there is a kind of proposition of laissez-faire as an ideology, and how what you propose is different from that. I'm sure it's different, but I will understand more how it is. But also, are we totally sure that, for example, some of the struggles that operate until the state are always bad? I mean, or, because I don't see that when I looked at how historically, for example, this society came up from the Second World War as very poor. It became, it managed actually to bring most of the populations here to a level of life that was radically different since just a few decades ago. So yeah, I was just wondering, just to continue the conversation toward this direction, how you don't get also buy into the arguments that it become what you propose also is a form of privatization, because what I see now is the full kind of speed on privatizing things rather than just imagining how things can remain collective and can continue to be common.
Okay. Now, okay, take this, put this off. If we look at neoliberalism and all those movements, they look at all kinds of possibilities to advance the societies, with the exception of one thing. They don't raise it. Freedom of access to resources. That's taboo. Knowledge, resources, and permissions. They can never think of somebody trying to make a factory without permissions. It's always tied to a government. My argument is that the minute there is need for permission, there is upper hand situation. Now, of course, one can argue that no, the people, the investors may use the law against the state, and they will manage. They may manage in one case, but they will not manage in other cases. So there is always a group of people. Let's take the right to access to, let's take the oil industry. Now the people who has the right to have companies like Shell and so on, they are the only ones who has the right to extract oil. They're always richer. And they're always use high technology to do their business. Example is transporting oil from one place to another. Why does it have to be in huge pipes, 2 meters? It can be 200 smaller pipes, where individuals can control it, own it, and operate it. It is less polluting, it's more manageable, it's. But in the outset, do we have to move that kind of oil? Why do we have to move the oil from one place to another? Why? Because our mentality in knowledge led to the consumption on oil, because electricity was consuming oil. Now we're discovering new ways of producing electricity. So because there is always an entity that decides for other what to do, knowledge will not develop in a way that it is local. It is always important. Electricity is an example. All over the world, electricity is produced by using either coal or oil, or not the sun, not the wind, because it's not local. Now the argument of you neoliberals that we want to give power to the people from the state, we should control the state, it is a game. It might succeed, it may not. Look at the United States. With all these ingenuities and universities, Trump became a president who next day signed few rules, I don't know how many, against green movement and so on. So in theory it does exist, but my argument is that the human intentions might prevail. In the Muslim world they say Islam and so on. I say, how much have we been waiting for someone to liberate Jerusalem like Salah ad-Din? We've been waiting. Something is wrong in our system. Islam is not like that. my argument. The same thing goes to the Western culture. We are believing in democracy. Now let's say that democracy worked very well like in Sweden and everything is transparent. How much earth do we need to live like Swedish people? It's still polluting. The best way to, I think, my argument is to avoid that is when the people have the power, what's available in the market will be mostly necessities and then needed things. Complementary things will be much less. But as long as there is borders between countries and there is nations, and these nations has a government, if they are good people, they will protect this nation from others. If they are bad people, they will create war with others. That might happen. Look at the United States. War in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere. For what? Resources. So as long as this existing political, economic structure exists, we will pollute the earth. The only way to break that is to free the people. When they are free, these companies, huge companies, will somehow disappear. In Syria now, for example, they managed to desalinate, I don't know what's the word, desalinate or what, to clear oil by burning it in small tanks to transform oil to gas, asphalt, water, and so on and so forth. It's primitive technology, but this primitive technology did not have the chance to develop in a larger scale. What we have now is oil refineries that's so huge, so big, so complicated. Only huge companies can do that. So technology went, as in electricity, with mass production in one place and distribution. The same with oil. How much electricity do we lose from moving electricity from one place to other? 50% of electricity is lost through مقاومة, through these wires. So the problem with democracy or neoliberalism, that there is always basically somebody representing you in your rights. And that someone might do it well, might not. In best cases, if he did it well, we are still consuming. Because the structure based on classifying people, there is always unemployed people who will work for almost free for those people. So the production of industry is to serve those people who consume more and more and more. Yeah, I like this example of David Harvey. Why do I have to buy new spoons? Why don't I use my grandmother's spoons? I'm not saying we should consume less. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if we gave the people the chance, I always give this example to Mediterraneans. If there is no borders in the Mediterranean area, the richest Kuwaiti will live much better than he's living now. Because Kuwait is rich people. Why? Because he will have all amenities of life, he will have security, he will have. Let's take another example. The streets. Principles will be developed to maintain, clean the streets without governmental intervention. I'm not saying that we should clean the street, no, but if the people have the power, companies will be established to serve the people if they are rich enough to clean the streets. But those companies under the supervision of the people. Distributing, let's say, the internet or electricity now, it goes into pipes or wires under the ground. It is monopolized by the company that's doing this task. But if the people had the power and they can select, they can allow 2 or 3 companies to give them the service. And the technology will be developed in a way that 3 or 4 wires can pass under the street, not necessarily one company's wire. So it is a problem of mentality that hindered the technology to go in this direction, it went to this direction. So I'm not saying that we do everything, no. If the people had the power, the resources were distributed according to the people's willingness to work, ambition, cleverness, and so on. What will happen is that companies will be established to serve the people better. Like, take the electric production now. Because here in these countries people had power, they are selling electricity to the state. But still the companies are there, buying it from the people. The company's role changed. Would it be another system where the people can sell it to each other? I don't know. So what I'm proposing is that I don't have a very clear picture how it looks like in the future, but I feel that we are in dead end. We need another system. This new system, all those calling for empowering people and so on, one thing they don't discuss: giving more full access to people to resources, knowledge, and permissions. They don't discuss that at all. They are looking for another role for the government. Smaller government, bigger government. Let's say if you have, in the Middle East, for example, Muslim cities, there was the major streets. In the major streets, nobody can do anything without the permission of everybody. But how do you bring everybody to, if one want to plant a tree in the street? No, they said any passerby's objection represents everybody's objection. So there is principles like these, I'll explain some of them tomorrow, that led to giving the people the power. So gradually the environment grew with the growth of population in very settled, sustainable way. But now when the government intervenes, everything is big. 2,000 housing project, 10,000 square hospital, and so on. The argument is not only about the built environment. No, you can push it further to education. The best universities in the world are private, not governmental. Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, private universities. What happens to our high school and elementary school if it was? Now there is argument in the field of education that the stamped ministerial curriculum should be abandoned because students are different, families are different, and so on. Anyhow, that's another argument, the education, the health, and so on. But I only talk about urbanization, and my argument is that to have more sustainable environment, we have to give more access to people. In Abu Dhabi, for example, because there is no revivification, lands became very expensive. If the building in a strategic location, they will destroy the whole building. What happens to these materials of 10-story buildings? They will take it and throw it away. And they make a new building. Simply because there is no revivification, that land became very important. It is desert. You can't build somewhere else. Why? Because there is a center of a city that became very, very important. Why not 3, 4 centers? If you give people access to resources, they will revive and they will spread.
Yeah, I mean, I would like a bit to touch upon maybe 2 things. From my also personal own experience, I think that one thing is responsibility, and how can you manage individual responsibilities, because what we are requiring in such a system that people will take their own responsibility into understanding how to deal with such a condition, but also I would say a cause that would bring people together in order to be productive together. And these 2 things we saw very strongly in place like a refugee camp, but also in my case, I lived during the first Intifada in Palestine, where basically the whole project was how can we survive alone without occupation. No? So we rejected the Israeli occupation. There was no Palestinian state. So what we did is that we create schools in our houses. We created, there was, we tried to bring cows and raise them in order to have our own milk. I myself, I studied in schools that were created by the teachers that are part of the neighborhood. And I have to admit that this formed me as a person. No? This was one of the most intense experience that I lived in my life, but because there was a sort of common cause where people comes together and they believed in something and they wanted to do together, so they supported each other heavily, and therefore they managed what I call responsibility. But when I worked in refugee camps, and there was, let's do here a sort of a small square for the neighborhood, and somebody wanted his car to be parked in front of his house. And in the refugee camps, of course, they still maintain the whole system of you would ask your neighbors, you would have the permission of everybody. But then if somebody would come out and says, I still want to park my car in front of my house, what we do with all these? Because at the end, I think that what you need is sort of structure where people believed in one thing that they come together for, and still in refugee camps, they are still have a cause of the right of return, so they still believe that they are together for a cause. What I find hard in this, and I sort of got it completely, and I think that it might work, I think that the major challenge here is how can we deal with the whole idea of self-organizations. I mean, people in a place like Fawar refugee camps where I worked, 5 were killed because somebody decided to build a terrace in the middle of the street and nobody managed to stop him. So what we do in these cases, how would you, look at these cases and suggest what might be possible within such a model?
It's very, very interesting, and this argument helps me a lot in my argument, that the people manage to manage themselves. But sometimes a chaotic situation may come because somebody did not follow the shared responsibility, or he has different vision than the shared responsibility. My answer is the following. Now, I always give this example. If we take, if you are forced to wear this type of outfit in the school and nothing else, when you are a teenager, you don't have the test of selecting clothes. But from the outset, from your childhood, if you are free to select, free to wear things, gradually you will develop the skill to select things better, because you tried and failed, and you tried and failed. And this trial and error is essential in what I argue for. Tomorrow I'll show some example from the built environment, that how trial and error is important in building conventions. When the conventions are built, it's very hard for the individual to stick out of it, because everybody will be against him. Now, your situation is very critical. Why? Because under occupation, and there is no resources, and under siege. But the normal situation is that people are free, they move in the land, they select the sites, the resources, they work together. In that case, because there is so much options and there is less tension, inventions accumulate and becomes very sophisticated conventions. If somebody violates the convention, there is the law, the judge, the people witness against him. He wants to stop the car in the street, and he does not own the street. We are the owner of the street. He will not stop his car. By law, he will be forced. That's why I say always, for a government, for the vision I'm talking about, is that the law, implementing the law is very important. maybe internally, not externally against with other countries. Internally, the only role of the government is the law, implementing the law. Conventions plays a major role in defining what is right and wrong. Plus the law itself. I'm talking about the Middle East. There is well-established principles in the urban environment that nobody can violate. If he violates, he will be punished. But if in your cases, in Palestine, under occupation, you manage to solve major problems, essential problems, what would you do if you had all the resources? You will do much, much better. Because the people are knowledgeable of their problems. Now the people don't know anything about building a building, for example, because the case I saw where water spout, getting rid of water and so on. If the people do these things, they become knowledgeable of the built environment. Let me give an example. In the traditional environment, when somebody builds next to him, and there is no rules or regulations. Now, the party wall between them, if the house is separated or joined, they both has to agree on the wall. What type of material it is, how high it is, and so on and so forth. They may do the worst possible wall because they have no experience. But these two, when they build the next wall, the experience is transmitted with the new neighbor who might suggest new materials. This time they made it with mud. It wasn't good. Next time it is of asbestos or stone. And gradually, because the accumulation of experience, you see the whole town using the same wall. The traditional town using the same type of wall. The highest possible, best solution for the society, although there is no rules and regulations. But now with the rules and regulations in the modern city, we don't have to talk to each other to build that wall. I know what I have to do, you know what you have to do, under the specifications of the municipality. We don't have to meet and talk. So the municipality is supposed to develop the type of wall between us. And because there are few individuals, although they are experts, they will not be like the whole city, where everybody is contributing to the development of that wall. If we think of it that way, the whole people are sharing knowledge in developing the wall, in getting rid of rainwater, and so on and so forth. So environmental knowledge will not be for a specific group of people, will be shared by all, will all participate in improving it. At that case, it becomes difficult for someone to build a huge palace, because everybody will say. In fact, he will not be able to do that because he doesn't have that much finance to do that. That's why we look at the traditional environment, we see the buildings are quite similar, and the people are happy in it. Now we see these diversities. Communities for rich people, communities for people, Kojagonda, favelas, and so on. Squatter settlements. So tomorrow I will show some slides about your question, responsibility. Responsibility is very important. Yes.
I also have a comment. When you say that we need resources, permissions, and knowledge, for me, I would also include time, because, I mean, I don't know if the lack of time is also a consequence of our capitalistic system, but even though I would like to contribute to clean my street, or I don't find the time for doing that, because we also want to, I don't know, to study, to work, to create things, and many times we feel this lack of time for doing, or even from making decisions. So that's why we have people that represent us for doing some things that we get organized.
Yeah, I think this is very important. But maybe there's misunderstanding. I didn't mean we have to clean the streets, we have to clean the roofs. No, I said if we had the power for the resources and we are rich enough because we are almost quite equal, there will be companies, there will be entrepreneurs who will develop companies to clean maybe the streets. Plus, we have the habit not to litter the streets. There will be companies to get rid of rainwater maybe, of sewage, providing electricities. But those companies will be dealing with them. As I'm buying clothes, I buy electricity, I buy telephone, but I have the freedom of choice. And it's not monopolized. And we, the residents in the street, we decide. Should we allow this company or that company? We'll argue about it. And nobody can corrupt us. Let me give this example. I always use this example. Now, you can easily, in the Middle East, for example, if you have 3-story buildings, you want to make it 5, you go to the municipality, you get permission. And you will do it. That's very clear. And because the building is sticking out, you rarely see that. But what you don't see is a businessman comes and that might happen also in Europe, few businessmen come together and they select a piece of land and they decide to make a mall there. And they will make a mall. More cars will come to the mall and the neighbors will be affected negatively by that. There was an interesting book by, I forgot the name, I'll bring it tomorrow, in Europe here, I think in Norway, a project won an award. The author of the book was saying, it is a train station or bus station, I forgot. The decisions of the planners was not rational. They rationalized their decisions. They make it look rational, but it's not rational. The same thing when they make mall somewhere, they rationalize the decision. It's not rational. It might be rational for them, but for the neighbors, it's damaging. If the people has the power, they say, no. You cannot make a mall because it will damage us. We will give you the permission. The same with the building height. They always say, oh, look at the Muslim city, it's crowded. Of course it's crowded because it was inhabited by 100,000 people. Now it's inhabited by 1 million people, poor people. Of course everything will look terrible. But in the past, if somebody wants to raise his story from 2 to 3, they say, you have to solve the waste discharge, because in 2-story building, 10 people were living. You make it 4, 20 people are living. You cannot do that. And the resident who want to make 4 stories cannot corrupt the people living around, because they will be damaged. But the official there in the municipality, you can easily pay him a bribe and give the resident who wants to raise his story for 4 stories the permission. But you can never corrupt the people living in the site, because they are the ones to be damaged. So in the traditional city, they managed to control the density of the city through what? The people make the decisions. Even they used to count how many people in the house when you throw pollution water for prayer. They have a discharge channel. They tell him, listen, there was 5 people in the house, now there is 10. Who will clean the channel for the 10? It's your responsibility, because his channel of water for prayer is passing through my house. I say, you cannot bring more people in the house. So density is controlled. So when the people are in control and they are rich, a lot of companies will appear to serve the people, the rich people, the all rich people. Life will be much more interesting than now. Now we have one McDonald's everywhere. The person in McDonald's, he cannot put 1 slice of tomato more. He cannot. There you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands and thousands of restaurants competing to attract the customer. A good example is the Swiss watch. Swiss watch, it's made by families and so on. How many brands do you have? And they are all good. If you exclude the Rolex and so on, but they're all good watches, because it is a country that makes watches, that families competing to make them. Everything will be like that. Almost high quality
taking that same example, for example, I'm taking my city, people, I mean, the government was trying to densify some areas close to the center,
Santiago.
where people go.
Santiago.
Yeah, in Santiago. So it was a neighborhood where, I don't know, has 3 floors of the buildings, and they wanted to densify so more people could live close to services and so on. And the community got organized to say that, okay, this is going to affect us, so we don't want to densify our neighborhood. But then, you know, in that case, you're giving power to the people to decide, but they're deciding in their own will, you know, like the other people that then will have to live in the periphery of the city and not have like the access to services and other things that you can find in the city center, you know, like I think that maybe people could act in a more individualistic way rather than considering all the other people that are living in the city.
Of course they will do that, because they don't have access to resources. If they have access to resources, they will go outside. If they have the permission to make factories without permission, they can do that. But they are congested, and they will behave against the society's other wishes. That's exactly like the example I gave in the Muslim city, where city composed of 100,000 people, now it's lived by 500,000. In your case, exactly the opposite, because people are powerless. That's why in the slides I showed, I said, remember they are poor, remember they are poor. This issue always comes. We look at poor people, how they behave, and we think they're bad. And they don't know their interest. No, but if they had the power and gradually, what makes the officials superior to us or to normal people? They're humans. With a signature, they became important people. And they will tell us what to do. A good example is a dean. Your student or your colleague became a dean. He tells you what to do. Suddenly someone became a minister. And he knows about everything. Like Trump, he knows about everything. Fortunately, in the state, there is a hierarchy of approvals and so on. But imagine he is a ruler of some third world country. So always, always, always remember that people don't have access to resources, and they are poor. They don't have access to knowledge. They are illiterate. Always remember this. They have no experience because they didn't practice life from their childhood in this free world. Can we put this off because it's in my eyes? Please, yes.
So if you consider that people has the power to
If I consider
that people is the one who has the power to mobilize and to change, at least to move or to look for these resources and to change the system. So how do you move these people?
How do
you move the people who is blind of capitalism, like people who has no time to think, has no time to maybe reflect about what's going on. So how do you convince people to change their current life when there is no damage in the environment? You know, okay, electricity is going to be more expensive, so in the future, in a few years, cars are not going to be a necessity. Maybe it will be a complement. But nowadays, right now, as you go, I mean, your current life, it's still the same. I mean, imagine here in Stockholm, I mean, I don't know, my neighbor or myself, that I'm going every day to work and then I'm coming back and it's go and and then maybe I'm gonna, I don't know, have children. I'm not thinking about society, I'm thinking in this individualistic point of view. How do you try to, which suggestions do you have to create this knowledge to the people in order to react, in order to act differently if they don't have any you know where I'm going?
Well, maybe I didn't understand you well, but let me rephrase your question. You are saying, how do you go about making people knowledgeable about their fate in life? Now they are doing things that are simple enough because other professionals are doing it for them, like the government, representative of the government, producing electricity and so on and so forth. Is that your question?
No, it's how do you mobilize people in order to
Yes, yes.
try to change
Well,
the system? So
yeah,
something is that you, of course, you can do it by resources, but how do you express, how do you make change?
Yeah. I don't think we need to mobilize people. They will mobilize themselves. If a person goes and discover in a place, let's say, we have this interesting system. Let me explain this. In Islam, that there is no taxes in Islam. Nobody is supposed to pay any tax except 2.5% from his production. And that production cannot be cash, has to be from the things that you produced. You, let's say you are working in a factory and you for milk, and you produce milk from cows, your tax will be milk. And this thing made me crazy. How do you, let's say you are in Jordan, there is olive. Your production should be olive. Or your tax should be olive. Okay? Cannot be cash.
What if you produce research?
Huh?
What if you produce research?
Research. You publish your knowledge, make it public. Part of it, I think. But let's leave that. What happens is that because the earth has certain elements in places, olive in this place, gas in this place, aluminum in this, steel in that place, and that if you produce olive and you have extra olive to give it away, you cannot move the olive. The people in other areas will come to the area that has olive to take it. This means that this area is rich of olives, that it can absorb more working hands. So people will move around from the unemployed area to the area that needs more hands. Gradually, this area that has olive one day will become a place saturated with people, because there is no vacant lands for olive and so on. But now they produce manpower to other places. So people are mobilized by moving from one place to other, because they don't have job and they know that there is job here in that for there is factories for pharmacy, pharmaceutical things and so on and so forth. So people will move around. Now I'll come back to your question about research. Research now is done in universities and often under the finance of companies. Companies seek profit and they push the university in a certain direction. Take the pharmaceutical industry, for example. They're making all kinds of research, all kinds of advertisements to sell goods away from natural products. What happens? They make profit, much profit, on the health of people. Just look at the internet and the pharmaceutical industry and see how the companies, the American companies, are cheating on the people, especially in psychological diseases. They make medicine that sometimes make the people more sick, keep them away from. But you say, how about iPhone? You may argue, we need Apple to make more research to develop the iPhone. My argument is the following. If you look at the history of invention, we'll find that people who invent things, sometimes they don't reap the benefit of their invention. Companies do that. The guy who invented the television didn't get much. RCA got more money. The British guy who invented the engine jet, Rolls-Royce took it. But now we have good law to protect the people from the inventor, from their inventions. But But imagine that there is no law. What happens to the iPhone? The millions of smart kids around the world will contribute to developing the iPhone. But now nobody can do that because it's protected. Who does that? Only Apple. And if you do it, you took their secrets, they will sue you. They will win in the United States, they will lose it against Samsung in Korea. This is what's happening. And we suffer. Why? Because an invention by Apple cannot be used by Microsoft. Simple things. Microsoft has to go around it. Apple, for example, in the beginning, Apple Macintosh was Windows on the top, was Windows. Microsoft has to do something else. It cannot improve this. What they did? The Windows on the bottom. So if you look at that industrial use, they're always manipulating knowledge with the power of the law. The first 200 cars, I don't remember, or 20 cars of Mercedes are not used by people. It's in other manufacturers to disassemble it and see what the invention in it, to go around it and reuse it. So if knowledge was somehow, I don't have the right to take your knowledge, but if I manage to open the secret, it's my right. So then we'll not have one iPhone. We can have different iPhones according to our test. Maybe I'm traveling a lot. I need iPhone with a bigger battery, without speakers, or smaller speakers. Maybe I am older person. I can always plug my iPhone on the electricity. I need bigger speakers. So we have hundreds of different iPhones designed by those younger kids, manufactured by others, and the market is rich, like the Swiss watch, different type of Swiss watch. But now we are sticking to this. They invented the iPhone 10, my iPhone 7 is now very slow, because they did that on purpose. Or what, I don't know. Imagine what happens to the knowledge of software if the people had the right to develop it. What these kids will do. But we cannot do that. That's what I say. If knowledge is, even an inventor will not stop. They keep inventing. And everybody is, if knowledgeable, if he knows that he can make a new application and he sell it and so on, till somebody opens that application, he'll reap some money. Hundreds of thousands will participate in creating new knowledge. But now you know it's dead end. You cannot do that. So there is no much participation from the people in creating knowledge. So if we have access to knowledge, access to resources, access to permissions, without permissions, then sometimes I argue, I say, if humanity followed this accessibility to all these things, we had the iPhone 1,000 years ago maybe. Because the land is so rich with these good materials, with the human, with his brain, we could have different life. But unfortunately, there is borders, rulers for the borders. They're fighting each other. What for? Why are we fighting? Why the French fought the British? For what? Why France colonized Algeria? For what? Then they were defeated. There is no wisdom. That's our problem.
One thing you said maybe that struck me when you say, when they ask me give real examples, I find it it's hard to give real examples. But I have a feeling that hearing you and hearing the questions is that sometimes might be helpful taking some examples that works for one of the things that you are proposing and then assemble them together. For example, now we are living in a building in Stockholm, and the building is a bit managed by the people that are living in that building. So when we want to change electricity, it's changed together with everybody. When we want to change internet, it's changed together with everybody. And since we are living there, we thought we don't want to live anymore in another place or in a single house, because we realized how much this, and in that sense, you know, responding to your time thing, it's helping us to save a lot of time. And in that sense, you know, there are a lot of old people in that building that are super happy to dedicate their time to this, because they are already retired. They find something out of it. They are organizing these assemblies and find for themselves something to do. So and it's a win-win situation for everybody. And since we are living there, we say, you know, we don't want to come back to a previous thing where we had to take care of everything ourselves. Because if you will take a single house outside, you are obliged to do everything, and you cannot ever save time. So I mean, one thing is this, and then you will take another example from Palestine, where people prove that they managed to live without a state, and this is possible. I mean, refugee camps, they are living completely without any control of the state, and they are surviving. And so in that sense, I think that what helps a lot for me is to understand what are, because it feels super abstract, but matter of fact, I mean, for people that lived all the time without a state, what you say make complete sense. But sometimes when you have a feeling that your life cannot be without all these structures that is managing your life, you have no even possibility of imagination of a life different. So, and in that sense, you know, the question, do we need a revolution to convince people, or how can we establish this new new system that you are speaking about? But then last point is that when you say then maybe the law, we have to enforce the law, and then maybe the law should be done by the state. In that, I have to say I disagree with you, because in a sense, you know, with all the experience of Palestinian, what survived is this law that was created by people. So if you have a real problem now in Palestine and you want to solve it, you don't go to court. You go to sort of traditional system, because this is the way that it can be solved. Even the police and the court would tell you there is no way we can solve it by the court. You should go back to the traditional thing. And this, what survived out of this period of living without state, even with the whole, you know, state arriving and the whole neoliberalism brought to Palestine to sort of solve the issue through the presence of neoliberalism, it's still proving that it is a system that is surviving all this. So I was a bit questioning, why do you think that law cannot be, as all the rest of the things, done by people and decided slowly, then you have a very strong system of verbal law that are, you know, in a place like Palestine, there was no police, but nobody was killing nobody, and it was a completely safe, and still surviving after 15 years of bringing the state. So I would like a bit to hear from you.
Thank you for maybe I need in my work some of the examples that you talked about, your residents and so on, to convince people. Maybe, inshallah, if I have time, I will do that. But let me finish first what I have. But regarding the law, maybe there is miscommunication. I did not present my case well. In fact, it's written in the two books that the law is not the first source of resolution. It's the last source of resolution. And I give this example. You know, in the Middle East, among the Sunnis, there is 4 schools of law. 4 schools of law. If there is dispute, they have to go on one of these. And if always the people argue against my argument, okay, which school of law do we follow? I say the following. Let's say there is 2 neighbors, one from this religious group, one from this religious group. And they had disagreement about the parapet. I always give this example. There is a roof, and if somebody goes to you know, in the Middle East, it's taboo to see the neighbor's woman, because women in the house without their veil, or in a situation that should not be seen by one. So this is taboo. This is a big thing, a major problem. So if somebody goes to the roof and he keep gazing to the woman in the other house, what happens? Do we force the people who built a staircase in his house to build a parapet? Or do we stop him from going up? and demolish his staircase. Now they will not go to the law. As she said, the first thing they do, they communicate. They did not manage, they go to the community itself to resolve dispute. If they did not manage, they go to the, in each community there is a guy who everybody goes to solve problems called muhtasib. They will go to him. If he could not manage, then if both stubborn, then they go to the judge. So this is the ultimate case. But in the book, in the second book, I show that rarely this happens. Because they are neighbors and they need each other, they are very careful not to damage each other. Why? Because maybe I'm planning to raise my story when I build one room in the rooftop for my son who's going to university. From where I get the permission? From the neighbors. So always I say, hi, how are you doing? And you notice that among students, they're very nice with us when they are in the college because they need grades. When they graduate, if they're fine, they will say hi. If not, they will not do that because they have interest in us. The system I'm calling for is that you put the interest of the people among each other in their hands. Those they have to be nice to each other. So this case that I will stop my car in the street would rarely happen. He has to be really rude and powerful person to do that. And this powerful person will not exist if there is access to resources and knowledge and permissions. Because everybody is like him. 9 people would defeat 1 person. In case of real difficulty, I'll go, so I'm sorry about this, that they go to the law. So, but the law is the last resort. And in fact, we have the ruler, Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He's a ruler who came in the, now they say the rulers, they're using Islam, or they're ruling by Islam. They're not ruling by Islam at all. That's why some religious elite, they don't like my argument. I say, we didn't have Islamic State, except the first 30 years. And then the Umayyad Empire, we had Islamic State in worship. I always say there is 3 kinds of relationships. The person with his God, people among each other, people and the state. The relationship between people, I don't deal much with it in my argument. Neither relationship between person and God. You want to pray, doesn't pray, that's his business. Okay? You are not forced to be Muslim. No, you select your religion. The problem with the relationship between people and the state, this was misused from the beginning of history, always in favor of the state. The state became so powerful. Now, what happened when the state became so powerful, in their hand, very soon in their hand, the people became poor. Poorer. I forgot the point that I was trying to come to from this. I talked, what was the question? Is about the law? No, but there is something, something interesting. It will come back. Inshallah, it will come back. Sorry for the bad presentation. I was sick for the last 2 weeks, still somehow sick, but I couldn't really prepare the presentation, the slides well. So the 3rd day it even be worse because the slides were not that much organized.
That's completely, opening a lot of questions for how managing,
What's interesting for me when I came to Sweden, I thought that there would be so much Swedish students because Sweden is a socialist, a democratic country with a socialist flavor. And the way the public spaces here are managed and dealt with is very interesting. Why? Because always the people ask me the question, you say, you're talking about the Middle Eastern cities, the people are illiterate, they throw garbage everywhere. They don't do that in the Scandinavian countries. Look for Sweden, for example, the streets are very clean. I say, yeah, but how much the state spending on public spaces? They say, well, maybe, let's say 100 million. But if the public spaces became 40% less, then the budget should be less. But if the budget is less, then we can utilize that money for health, for education, for entertainment. But then the people will say, but we don't want better health, education, and so on, because we are satisfied. We need more accessible public spaces. This is an interesting argument. I wanted to hear, to really debate that, but it didn't come. Because this country is one of the best successful countries. There is no argument to defeat this system except that if we continue consuming that you are doing, we need, I think Sweden is 4.5, 5.6 or 6.5 the footprint of its pollution. So we need, I think, 3 to 4 global Earth, to sustain this level of life.
I don't agree that it would be a perfect thing, that this is the only. I mean, I personally, since I arrived to Sweden as a foreigner, it's not necessarily that you feel you are really belonging to that public space. That public space is made with a certain codes and regulation, and as somebody that is coming from outside, you feel all the time that you are almost obliged to behave. You know, I feel all the time I'm the wrong person in the wrong place, in the public space. And it makes you even physically feel that, and of course there is the whole rhetoric that public spaces are completely accessible, everybody can go there, but you rarely see people from different colors in the same place. And actually you are all the time in the public, you are taught, if I would be doing something, somebody would come to you and say, you should have not behaved this way, but in a manner that is paternalistic, no? It's that this is the way you should behave in what is the Swede public. We have our codes, we have our regulations, and I all the time say I feel myself moved from no father, from being an orphan and you have absolutely no care of a state and there is nobody taking care of you, to a very strong father, where the major problem of Swedes is how to still be getting their independence, because one of the major problems when you have a very strong father is that he is there, sort of controlling your life, and even when you get married, kids and everything, you still have this strong father. So I think that there are quite, I mean, I personally don't know what I prefer most. I most probably prefer to be an orphan rather to have a very strong father that would control. But of course with a strong father you have protection, you have feeling of safety, you have that feeling that you will not, you know, if you need medical education, health, but that does come with a very high price. It comes with you compromising your sort of independency and all what you are speaking about of, you know, creating this possibility of being able to create. Sometimes I feel people withdraw. They accept that the state would take complete responsibility for their life, and I feel this is one of the major issues Sweden needs to deal with in this period, I believe.
To continue on this thought, I mean, also there is a particular situation.
You agree with her? You are Swedish?
I'm Swedish, and it's a rather different take on it, because I agree with it. Very much, maybe except I think it's also important to highlight now the situation, maybe where there is also this huge father has started with withdrawal. We have seen a period over, however we want to historize it, but over a period of 20 or 30 years, of course, when the state has started to dismantle their functions and withdraw. But if you still look at all of these different surveys, you see that Sweden, among us, maybe together with Norway, has the highest trust in the state. in all the world. So that is constant throughout these 30 years. You see the dismantling, but at the same time, the trust is still there. And also, if you look historically, of course, with the welfare state, what was done is that all of these different mutual ways of coexist, all of it has been incorporated in the state. I mean, with the welfare services. So it's also very little knowledge of experimenting and doing things outside the state. There is very extremely little, because what the Swedish Social Democratic project was about was taking the state on all levels. I mean, even on these micro levels, it should be connected to the state. So I think with your lecture here today is, for me, super interesting. And why I haven't posed questions is I still digest it, and thankfully we will have these 3 days. But so, I mean, bringing these arguments here is of, I mean, especially also with this, with father leaving the space, is, I mean, it's of, it has an urgency in it. And then, I mean, and this is not, of course, only here, but what I mean when you speak also, thinking about, I mean, lives beyond depth, or how could we organize, I mean, life beyond these advertisements, because of what I think with both depth and ads, I mean, it also has this, of course, biopolitical function, that it somehow, I mean, it creates us. If, I mean, we have all this, we can go to Lazzarato or these theorians that has shown that depth is also a biopolitical project. And I mean, with ads, I think it's very easy to say that it's creating these fake desires. But we should not maybe see them as fake, they are real. But then of course, if we take that away, what could we fill our life with? That would be the, what other desires? And then, I mean, that, so you're putting words on something that is, I mean, very hard to imagine, because it's something that is not yet here. That's why I wanted to pose a question that was similar to yours, Sandy, in some house, that I felt an urge of examples amongst us today. Just to be able for me to visualize, to continue the conversations, and also so we don't make it maybe into this, once again, to a perfect utopia yet to come. So we somehow can see that all of the things that you are mentioning, it exists around us, but where so this could also, I mean, in the end, if there's also a question in this, is that I would be curious to hear you more about where you see this has happened, with what literature you're engaged with, and in this creation.
Maybe we need 1 or 2 hours, so I learn from your opinions in the last day, when the picture becomes clearer, after tomorrow.
Great. If there are no more questions, maybe for today it was a great beginning, and I like the idea that we can continue this conversation. I'm sure that tomorrow, there would be some examples. I think, we can definitely look more closely to certain specific cases that maybe it helps to land some of the discussion in more concrete terms. But yeah, maybe we can just continue the conversation also over lunch. We can go down. We have lunch, and we don't have to stop talking.
Okay.
And then we leave you for your afternoon.
Yes. I have to go and sleep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.